not just biology and a skin, with a brain, with some consciousness. That's so often how so many of you just see yourselves. How are we going to get from A to B, and how are we going to work this puzzle and get through it all? Oh, there's so much more going on. I would like to remind you of how big you are. The human soul, something that is a spiritual part of you, acknowledged worldwide. We have said this before. Every religion, belief system on the planet has some kind of metaphor for a bigger you, a soul. Those who work the oceans talk about numbers of souls on board. There is an acknowledgement from all Scripture that there is something bigger than you. It's a shame, dear ones, that a linear planet with linear belief systems that are supposedly ones that are worshiping a magnificent God would then tell you the soul exists for one reason: to be punished later or to be rewarded later. It's almost like the soul is some kind of a vehicle, punishment or reward. You have something that happens after you die. Does that sound right to you? Your soul is part of the creative source. Did you know that? I'm going to talk about how big you are. How big is the soul of a human being? There are those who actually tried to put measurements on it, saying, well, it has to do this and that, perhaps mixing it up with that which is called the Merkaba, which is a spiritual bubble around you in linear form while you walk the planet. Huge it is. 8 meters wide around every single human being. That's not your soul. Let's talk about this. When did humans get their soul? And the answer is yes. They never did. It always was. Did you know that? This is a lesson that is difficult to teach and understand and cognize because the human is linear. Another time we have said this: everything has a beginning and an end to you on your planet. Whether it's your life or your car or a pair of socks or a string, it has a beginning and an end. And so this is how you think. Of course, until you get to God. What was the beginning of God? And you would say, well, there was none, because God always was. Well, dear ones, use some spiritual logic. If your soul is part of God's creative source, it always was. You, the bigger you, the soul of you, always was. Always. And you always will be. And you might say, well, that doesn't make sense. How does this then relate to humanism and all of these things? Dear ones, this is a puzzle to you. It is not to us, and we've explained it many, many times. This soul of yours, designed to do the very things you're doing now, to come to various places and take human form and develop consciousness and work the puzzle. And then when you're done, you go back to the soul and it goes perhaps someplace else. It's all part of a universal system of beauty, benevolence, kindness. And there is a purpose for it. There's a purpose for the veil. All of the things. There's a purpose for free choice, of having you here on this planet being able to make choices without interference from an angel standing next to you saying, don't do that. There is a reason. But your soul is immense. How big is God? You would say, okay, I understand what I don't understand. That the soul is huge and immense, but I'm a human. And I'm here right now. How does that help me? And I will tell you this, because there is a multidimensional part of every single human being And it's not sequestered into that which is perhaps your pineal. It's in your DNA. It's in every cell of your body. It is starting to receive light. That is what the shift is about. Listen, the shift on the planet is about you receiving more multidimensional savvy, more multidimensional awareness, which is starting to evolve into higher consciousness. Do you want that again? This is evolution, an evolution of consciousness. And that's what is happening. You are starting to receive that multidimensional part. And that is creating the evolution of awareness, light, consciousness. That is the thing that is stirring everything that you're seeing right now. And that is also going to stir into some solutions, because all of you are going to become more aware. Kryon, I'm not really sure I understand how we can be multidimensional. What does that mean? Let me give you a hint. Something we have given you before to show you this equipment you have called DNA, called cellular structure, called consciousness, is not simply in your skin. Your body's in your skin. Your consciousness and the multidimensional parts and pieces of your DNA is immense. Identical twins. Let's go there again. Identical twins on this planet. Do you know any? Would you like to speak to them about what I'm going to say next? They'll tell you. One can be in one hemisphere of this planet and another can be in another hemisphere in this planet. But when something happens that might affect them both, like for instance, their mom's in trouble, they both know it. One will pick up the phone, and the other one will answer, and the other one will say, I felt it. What's happened? In other words, with identical DNA, two human beings, two individuals, two consciousnesses are allied in such a fashion that thousands of miles away, they're getting the same information. That has a physical nomenclature, a term, a name, and it's called entanglement. It is a quantum aspect, and that is, a quantum aspect is one that is beyond linear. Entanglement, well known now to physicists, is something that is astonishing. Where you are so big, if you're entangled with anything, that you could be on another star, another planet. And if something happens here, the other part of you would know it instantly. Distance doesn't matter. Time doesn't matter. That exists. Ask a physicist. It's real. And it's happening even within your DNA. How big are you? You're as big as God. I want you to understand that you have the ability to drop into your soul, into your heart, they say, and have the most benevolent wave of love come over you, where actually that consciousness of yours will stop the rhetoric of all the negative things and say, it's all right. I am that I am. I am beyond what I ever will be. I came before I was. That is a multidimensional statement. And you will know who you are, helping you to get through all of the strife that is so linear and so now. There is hope for this planet, dear ones. There is hope. There is solution, if you will hold on to it. That's the thought. That's the light. Light is starting to amplify itself, and in the process, it's disturbing the dark a lot. And the darkness wants to raise up and tell you it won't go away. But light will win this puzzle. Light is already winning in certain areas. Hold fast. Know who you are. I am Kryon in love with humanity. And so it is.
And I invite you to place your hands on your heart just for another moment or two and really integrate that beautiful message of your magnificent soul. And if you've had your eyes closed, you may open up those precious eyes of yours, bringing your awareness now more fully into your body. Bring your awareness into the room. You can relax your hands down onto your lap. And we move into the next part of our program. And Lee, this is great because we're actually interviewing another Lee.
Well, not only that, but intuitive. He's a channeler.
Absolutely.
Come on. Anyway,
Absolutely.
That's part of his work. It's a part of his work.
We're in love with him already.
I know.
And
what can I say?
Lee, we want to make sure. Lee, are you there?
I am here. Hi.
All right.
Hi, wonderful. Well, Lee Harris has so many amazing things to offer. We want to tell you all about that.
He's a globally acclaimed energy intuitive and transformational teacher who offers grounded, practical teachings focused on helping conscious, intuitive, and sensitive people heal, thrive, and live a better life. He began doing intuitive readings out of his home in England in 2004 as a part-time healer. That's it. We'll talk about that later. Now based in California, he has built the company Lee Harris Energy into the multimedia worldwide event company that it is. His book, Energy Speaks, became an instant bestseller in March 2019, and his intuitive messages reach hundreds of thousands of people every month. They really do, folks. Hundreds of thousands of people every month via his free and highly popular monthly energy update videos. These videos offer practical guidance for navigating daily life with clarity, empowerment, and optimism.
Now, Lee has an acclaimed soul magic and energy mastery retreats, as well as the energy tune-up seminars. They are held around the globe, and they're adventures into the deepest aspects of living, loving, and awakening. Leading a 10-member international team, Lee is passionate about grounding creative spirituality into these challenging times. And boy, are they challenging, right, folks? Lee is also very determined to see people experience impactful and abundant lives while supporting each other through community.
All of this, and we really haven't mentioned anything about the music. I don't want to go into it because it'll take another 2 or 3, times as long as the other one. Many albums, great musical associates, composers, very popular with the new age musical scene.
A true creative, Lee.
A true creative.
Yeah.
And I love that because of my background as well. But I'll let you talk about the music if you choose. Welcome to the show, and we turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here. And Lee, it's a real treat to get to connect with you after all of these years of knowing you. And thank you for all that you have done to pioneer this field, which for me was a very unknown field when I first began channeling. And thank you.
So how did it all begin for you, Lee? Take us through all of the unfolding of your journey.
So in my late teens, I started to heal myself one step at a time. So I got very into self-growth work and self-development. And I would go off to workshops and I would have tarot readings. And whenever I would get into the healing realms as a participant, I would feel more alive, more passionate, this is life. This is the real thing. This is not the smaller version of life that we're living when we're not in this energy field. But I didn't realize at the time that I would end up working in it and being a facilitator. That came a lot later. And I was 23 years old when I started channeling. And it happened to me very spontaneously on the tube train, the London Underground in the UK where I was living. And I just heard the voice of my guides one day. And after I had, gone through all the questions you go through where you think, is this what multiple personality disorder is? It could have been. What I soon realized was the voice that I would hear had not only the most useful information and could see things that I couldn't see, But as soon as I sat with the information that I was given, my whole energy field would change and I would start to expand again. So that began my relationship with the channeling. And I think for a few years there, with the few friends that I felt safe to talk about it to, who were spiritual as well, I would give free readings and people would come to me. And I think it was a friend who was a yoga teacher who suggested I do it for a job. So it was 2004 when I started doing donation-based readings. And I didn't think anyone would come. And I did readings for 15 years. And out of the readings grew everything else.
That's astonishing. You know, I couldn't help but notice, and you're helping hundreds of thousands of people today, but in your description of yourself, you don't use the word channeling. Is that because people seem to be afraid of channeling?
Well, it's funny. I remember thinking with channeling that people were quite afraid of it, especially in England. I have to say, this country is much more receptive. And this is England, let's say, in the year 2000, so 21 years ago. I did actually call myself a channeler, but what I also did, because that word would be a barrier for people, I think the heading on my leaflet was guidance writing. And what I did in the leaflet was I explained what the effect of the experience of the reading would be, as well as saying I was a channeler. So, and now I think because I work in a few different ways, so there's the channeling side where I channel my guides, who I refer to as the Z's. They gave me the name Zachary when I first met the lead spokesperson. And then in later years, a few other names came through beginning with Z. So the audience who followed my work started referring to them as the Z's because they didn't know who was going to show up, but they all began with the Z. So
I love it.
They became collective again. In 2012, they said, we're now going to speak as a collective voice again because unity is important. And it's been useful that we've separated this way, but from now on, we will only be a group. And so sometimes I'm channeling the Z's for a message, and other times I'm speaking to people from what I call the intuitive level. So if the Z's are the top of my ladder, the ladder I can access, the intuitive level is kind of halfway down. So I'm getting bits of information from them about what I'm seeing, but I'm also sensing and feeling what I'm feeling in the collective intuitively, and then hopefully giving people either recognition about what they're feeling or aha moments or different ways to deal with it, so that in a way we normalize the world of energy and intuition, which, as we know, is really very normal. It's very much a part of our lives. But I think in mainstream society still, there can be a barrier or a resistance or a disbelief about it, which I fully understand. If you haven't experienced it, it would be easy to think it doesn't exist.
I agree. I want you to take us through, if you can. Many people know you from Energy Speaks, and that's how they know your name and all. What is it about? What happened to get you to write that book? I mean, the whole everything. I think they'd like to know that.
I didn't want to write that book, Lee. I was doing something else. I was thinking I was going to write a book called The A to Z of Energy, which I soon realized was enormous and was going to take far too long. And during that period of time, I had self-published 2 Energy Speaks volumes. And I was on tour doing lots of live events that year. And people would always say to me, I love those books. I have them by my bedside. I flick open a page. So I had this opportunity to create a book. And I suddenly thought, I'm not doing the guides a service by not using this opportunity to look at all of the material that we have in writing and add a whole load more that has never been published, but also to re-edit and reorganize the way it was presented. So Energy Speaks is a bit like a greatest hits of everything that my guides delivered between the years of 2006 to 2018. And we basically took parts from messages about every area of life. So you've got sex and sexual energy, you've got money and abundance, you've got sleep and what happens when we sleep. So Energy Speaks is kind of a compendium of some of the most important topics my guides had kind of offered to us as to how we're experiencing life and how we can work with it.
Beautiful. One of the things that I've seen unfold in Lee's work is a real shift from 2020. Well, really it started in 2012, but 2020 was a whole new direction for Kryon and the Kryon work. And so I am curious as to whether you are feeling for yourself and your work, whether there's a new direction coming out of it.
Yeah, good. Well, I'd love to know more about that for you, actually, you guys. But for me, it was a couple of different things happened. I knew in around 2016, I thought I was going to quit. And I sat with it for almost a year. Wow. And, of course you think, well, what else am I going to do? Because this is, this keeps me busy and keeps me occupied. But I felt like I'd come to the end of the road in a way with everything I'd been doing. And I would just be repeating myself. So around that point, I kept hearing this message from them, you are needed and now is your time. And this was a message I was being called to deliver to people. So I realized I needed to diversify the way I worked in order to hopefully help empower the other people who were ready to go out there into the world and do their work, but perhaps didn't yet know how or had some fears or some lack of strategy, whatever it was. So I really started shifting my work about 5 years ago, but end of 2019, it got very serious. There were a series of events that happened in my personal life and in my work life that gave me this knowing. I was in Costa Rica at the end of 2019, and I had a lot of very powerful, life-changing and mystical experiences there. And I knew when I came away from Costa Rica that I was being initiated. And it wasn't that I hadn't taken my work seriously before, but I got this feeling of things are getting serious now. And they'd always talked about 2017 to 2024 being very difficult years on Earth. And yet they also said these were years that people who were light workers were probably going to feel more alive, more on purpose, and even potentially happier than they ever had, even while we were seeing all of this chaos and unraveling going on around us, which seemed a strange message, when I heard it in 2016. But I think now I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. So for me, everything got quite serious starting November 2019, and then mid March, just before all the lockdowns hit, I just had this overwhelming feeling of, here we go. Things are about to get very, very intense. Yeah. So it's definitely colored my work ever since then. And even though we do plan several months ahead, we're very in the moment too. So we can respond to what we're seeing and what's going on. So I would say that's probably been the biggest change for me in the last couple of years. But the messages are very direct too, about more than anything, they will talk about the importance of us holding our frequency, holding our core, discerning what's ours, discerning what's illusion. And I think the messages are just a little more rubber meets the road time than before, perhaps.
I agree totally with that. We're experiencing that very same thing. It's great to hear it from you and in your words. Now, it's fun for me because every time I'm on a show, people ask me about channeling and things like, so I'm going to do it to you. One of the things that I would like to know from you, because channeling is different for each of us. It's not a thing that people do. It has to do with our personalities and our life force. When you get messages, are they basically messages you're putting in the book and delivering, or do you get personal messages to you, Lee, that say, here, go here, do this, or whatever? How does that work for you?
Absolutely. So it's three types for me. There are the messages that I bring for people, which, as you both know, you're holding space for something for people, and you've agreed to show up and you've agreed to bring a message, or if it's a recording, that's one side of the work. So that's when it's going out more to the public. For myself, there are two different ways I get the messages. They either hand them to me when I'm not looking for them, and that doesn't happen a lot. It might happen as infrequently as 6 to 10 times a year that I hear a verbal message, but I'm working a lot with my intuition anyway. Yeah. I'm testing things all the time with my body, my senses, following, living intuitively more than I ever have anyway. But then the other side is when I hold space for my own question and answer session with them. But the times they give me unsolicited messages are usually the hardest. Like I was living in Colorado, Boulder in 2014. I'd been there for 4 or 5 years, and I really thought, oh, this is going to be my home for a while. And I just heard one day, you're leaving Colorado, prepare, tie everything up. You have to go, and you know, California was where I knew I had to go to. So even though I trusted the message, I then of course went through a certain level of grief for about 3 to 6 months, just kind of letting go of it, because I knew it was correct, but sometimes they're ahead of us in terms of the timeline, and they're not necessarily dealing with the human feelings or healings that we have to in order to be here on the planet.
So we spent most of this time talking about what's gone on with you and what's happened and what's about channeling. I would like, if it's possible, to take some time for you to actually teach what you teach. What do you have to say to this audience who is looking at you now about our times? What is it you're teaching that you can now teach us, and what are the tips and things of that nature to get through all of this?
Sure. So let's see. Well, not knowing what you are all holding, what you're holding for your audience, I'll just kind of go with what comes to me. A couple of kind of hit points that are really coming up right now. The Z's keep talking about the world situation. It will get worse before it gets better. And that part of our job is to find our balance point within that waving sea that we're in all the time. So by all means, have the grief you need to feel, have the sadness, have the anger, but the emotion should be short. You know, if we're really truly letting our emotions move through us and healing through what we need to heal through in resonance to everyone's feelings and everything that's going on, we should be able to move it through our body and flush. If we're getting stuck, if we're getting impacted, if there's, you know, if you're depressed for a very long time or you're angry for a very long time, you really need to dig in and get to the core of that, because it will pile up more and more. So the ways you can do that are to enlist the help of a friend who is patient and will hold space for you, or a therapist or a counselor, or find ways to put your congested feelings or congested experiences under the microscope. Perhaps it's journaling. I mean, there are many different ways that we can really give focus to our healing. But the other piece that they speak about when it comes to our healing, which is a little different to letting your feelings move through you and investigating them if they're not, is ancestral healing. So they've talked a lot about how with much of the, you know, the name that was given conspiracy theories that we've all been taught to kind of have as the headline for some of these revealing and interesting and illuminating and sometimes misleading pieces of information that we find, is they say, check the emotion it's coated in. Because they said most conspiracy theories will usually have at least some grain of truth in them. But they said, is it designed to inform or enlighten you, or is it designed to hijack you? And you'll know it's hijacking you if it's coated in a certain emotion. So let's say someone delivers information to you and you hear it and you're like, oh my God, really? Is that what's going on in the world? That's quite scary. Ask yourself, has the information scared you, or was it coated in a fearful way? And what you have to be mindful of is the agendas that are running on the planet that are darker. They want to co-opt visionaries, and they want to co-opt people who are used to manifesting and seeing the future. So if they coat it in a certain emotion and you then take that fear into your body and go, oh my God, that's actually what's going to happen. They said no timeline is set. They said there are certain things that we are going to have to go through in the next few years that are going to be thematically unavoidable, but that we create the future. So we have to be very careful that we are flushing through our fear, flushing through our emotional triggers, and also paying attention to when things are ancestral. So, for example, they said people who are panicked about certain areas of the climate or certain things they're seeing going on with governments right now, ask yourself, am I completely in the moment with this, or am I processing what happened in Pompeii? Or am I processing what happened in Atlantis? Or am I processing that time that I had my freedom taken away in another life? And it's not to dismiss those ancestral healings we're going through. Quite the opposite. We're shedding a lot through everything that's going on in the world. And the more we can shed this stuff and allow ourselves to shed it and hold space for it, but let it move through our system, the quicker we will come back to our vibrational power, which is what we need now. And the other piece I'll throw in is they've talked about the earth and underneath the earth a lot in the last few months. They said many of you are focused out there horizontally, and many of you look to the stars and the cosmos. They said, don't forget the power and the energy and the crystalline energy that's in the earth, which wants to come up and through us at this time. And we can only really allow that in if we shed some of our earth density. So again, that would be the fears, the hopes, the emotions that we have. So they're very inclusive of emotions. And they say that our emotions are our greatest power, but they need to be as aligned as they possibly can be. So that's why anyone who's stuck in something or noticing a repetitive pattern in your life, a repetitive fear, a repetitive anger, a repetitive judgment, this is because it's up for healing for you. And the more you can do to help yourself heal it, the sooner you'll return to your power and your light. The last thing I'll say is they say that silence is golden. You know, choose your battles when it comes to speaking your truth. Everyone's speaking their truth right now, but very few people are listening or critically reviewing the truth that they're absorbing. They're just taking that piece of information as golden or gospel because they don't have emotional or energetic capacity to take a wider look at everything. So they said there'll be times when you need to speak your truth in order to perhaps illuminate something for someone else. And there will be times when silence will be your ally. They say that this is going to take a few years to really clear up and shake out. So they say conserve your energy as much as you can. And when you've had enough of the outside drama, make sure you come back. Self-care, refuel, remember you're alive in this moment. None of us are promised life tomorrow anyway. And that can be a very good way to bring yourself back to the present and go, what can I appreciate right now? What can I cultivate right now? What can I bring right now? And equally, if you're exhausted, rest and get off Facebook newsfeed if you're exhausted, because that isn't going to help you.
I completely resonate with everything you just said.
Yeah.
And you brought in the ancestors, you brought in
Gaia.
the earth, Gaia.
Yeah.
And even as you were talking about flushing through the emotions, I had very strong visualizations of sending those emotions down into the earth, Gaia, because what happens, it gets transmuted in the energy, in the crystalline grid, and it comes back to you as available energy. And I invite you, if you want to elaborate more on that grounding earth connection, I would love to hear more about that from you.
Well, I love the way that you just explained it. It's perfect. And one of the things that they have said, which I think is very in line with where you're going, is they said the earth is, they said she can take a lot. She can take a lot more than the surface can.
Yeah.
So I really love what you said about sending it down. It's interesting. One other thing that, I have noticed is reminding us all that our self-care routines and our shedding routines are very personal. I know for me, when I was, new to the spiritual community and the self-care community, the part of me in my head that thought am I getting it right? Is this the right way to go? I still see a lot of that in our communities. I should probably do yoga, even though I tried it 5 times and it did nothing for me. It's like, well, no, at that point, maybe you let yoga go and you go over to something else. Right.
That's like Lee and I. I mean, I enjoy doing my own form of yoga. Lee and we joke about I'm going off for my morning walk, and Lee will say, well, I'm going for my morning sit.
So you didn't have to tell people that.
Because he likes to just go to the computer.
My own kind of yoga. Yes.
Tell
brilliant.
us more with your self-care and everything you were sharing.
Yeah, well, and it's been a long journey for me to both find the things that work for me, but also let myself off the hook with the things that I thought I should be doing. For years I thought, well, I should be meditating. And then I realized there are different ways I meditate in my life. Sure, it's not the way that meditators do it. And so the most important thing, and this is one of the things that I think we're a little out of kilter with as a world right now, is knowing where our balance is and knowing how to soothe ourselves. And sure, sometimes you might soothe yourself with 3 glasses of wine or 2 donuts, but you're going to pay the price for that in a way long term. So there's no judgment here on the things you are doing to soothe. But if you notice that your soothing mechanisms are all either quite extreme or not necessarily long-term beneficial, this is really a time to figure out, what is it that does light me up? And it might be putting on Metallica in your bedroom really loud and jumping around and screaming your head off. So, this is where we are all unique, and it's important for you to, away from your partner, your kids, the people who are dependent on you, just to have something for you that, if you do this for 10, 15 minutes a day, perhaps several times, you will reset yourself. And that is also part of shaking off the energy of the collective that we're in. Because even if you aren't focused on the news or involved with other people, we can feel it. We can feel the anxiety levels in the collective right now. We also can have them ourselves. So this soothing practice, being very personal, is very important. And they have been talking about self-care like nobody's business in the last couple of years, more so than they ever did. And so I've found, as I've deepened with my own, I'm like, oh, I am much more balanced. I am more grounded. I am less stressed than I could be if I wasn't taking care of just these things in my life that work for me. So one I'll throw out is water. When we have a shower or put ourselves into a body of water, we break the electrical circuitry of our energy field. So if your energy field is a little revved up and you introduce water to it, onto the body, over the body, or put your body in it, it will change your circuitry. So water is one of my go-tos, to kind of get myself in water and shift my energy. But for people listening or watching, it might be very personal. So don't be ashamed of your self-care routines, and do make sure you practice them not as a luxury, but as a necessity.
It's fun because everything you've said is what I've been teaching for years in different words, including what's happening now and all this. And then you just went to water. And anybody who follows me knows that when I have any problems myself, and there's quite sometimes I do, what I immediately do is go take a shower. and that's when I get the best intuition flashes, and even some personal message from Kryon. But I almost have to be in the shower for this. And people laugh and say, well, at least you're going to get cleaner than you think. But truly, that's right. We only have a couple of minutes left. Tell folks all about your site, your YouTube, your messages, so that they can hook into all this.
Great. So my website's leeharrisenergy.com. And if you go there, you'll find everything that I do. And I do put out usually 3 to 4 videos a week on YouTube. My channel there is Lee Harris Energy. And once a month, I do something called an energy update, where for about 25 to 30 minutes, I'll take the pulse of what's going on energetically, tell you the 6 to 8 themes that I'm noticing are happening now or just about to come in the coming month, and give a few tips or tools to deal with the energies that we're doing. And then the other thing that I do, as well as my members community, the portal, I create music with Davor Bozik, and we create music tuned to 528 hertz, which is a healing frequency. Yeah. So sometimes it's a very much sounds like a traditional or alternative pop song. Other times it sounds more new age, sometimes the spoken word, but we tune it to 528 hertz because that's a healing frequency. So as you listen, the encoding goes into your body. And we did a similar thing with Energy Speaks, the audiobook, which Davor underscored for me with tones and frequencies that line up with our human bodies and different parts of the universe, so that as you're listening, that sound goes into and through you for a healing as well.
I'm so glad you mentioned the music, because everything is energy. Everything is vibration, and the music just cuts through all the static and noise and feeds the cellular structure of your body. Lee and I were just talking about how impactful music is, and the reason we love movies so much is because of the soundtrack.
Well, that's what I did for a living. I recorded soundtracks before.
And music